All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our CMDB Health Deep Dive Outreach session for today. My name is Callan. I'm an inbound product manager here at ServiceNow, and today we're going to be talking about keeping your configuration items fresh. If you've been to one of these before, you've probably seen this safe harbor notice. I don't think we're really going to be talking about anything too future looking today, but if anything comes up that's forward looking, essentially this says don't make purchasing or investment decisions based on that, because anything that's not already released is not guaranteed. All right, we've got some great speakers with us today. I love working with these two guys. So we've got Mark Bodman. He's a senior product manager. He does our outbound product management for CMDB and other things in our data foundations group. And we've got Emir and Mark, who is in a group we call product success. He's a product success architect, both very senior guys, and they know the CMDB very well. So we're lucky to have them here with us today. And I'm Callan. I'm inbound product manager and do product and program management at ServiceNow. All right, for our agenda today, we'll start with a little bit of an overview on CMDB Health. So we've got just a couple of quick slides. We've covered health in a little bit more detail at a previous CMDB Health deep dive session that we did, I think back in September last year. And that is posted on the CMDB private community forum, which if you're attending this call and you're not already a member of it, you will be after the session wraps up. We go through and upload folks into that forum. And we'll post, I don't know if we've already posted a link, but we will post a link and we'll repost it later as to where you can go to get to that forum. So it's not open to just anybody with a ServiceNow account. It's you guys who attend these outreach sessions. And this session as well will be, the recording will be uploaded probably within a week or so. We typically don't get them uploaded right away, but that's where you'll be able to find it. You do need to be logged in to that community forum for the link to work. So if you click it and it's not working, just log in and try it again, maybe refresh your browser. Anyway, so we will talk a little bit about CMDB Health. Then we've got three topics: the hierarchy, sort of a hierarchy overview of hardware and CMDB, talk about lifecycle policies, and then really the last section is on using vCenter, manage your VMs, and some governance tips. All right, so let's start this with a really brief coverage of CMDB Health. So we talk about CMDB Health, and from a ServiceNow perspective, what you'll see us talk about are a number of specific metrics that measure aspects of the data that is in your CMDB, or the table structures and data setup of your CMDB. And so to assess your health and to improve it, there's unfortunately not a big easy button to press. Depending on the metric and what the issue is, there can be some effort involved. And we're talking about just a couple of those metrics today. But why do you do it? Well, there are business benefits to doing it. And so we measure the health of pretty much all the instances that are production ServiceNow instances. And we've done correlation. So this was a lot of number crunching actually that's happened, and you may have seen these numbers before, but we can correlate customers so we took customers who are essentially healthy, top quadrant, and customers who are unhealthy. And customers who are healthy resolve high priority incidents faster, they have fewer high priority incidents, they fulfill requests faster. There's other metrics I'm not going to share today, but they have fewer vulnerabilities, like security vulnerabilities, change management goes smoother. So lots of benefits to having a healthy CMDB. So how can you measure the health of your CMDB? Well, there's two ways. There's the CMDB Health Dashboard, which is out of the box dashboard. That's the completeness, compliance, and correctness, if you're familiar with that. And then there's the data foundation dashboards. And these are relatively newer, although they are a few years old now. They're free. They're in the ServiceNow store. So you can go pick them up. Just search for data foundations. There's two dashboards, really. There's a CMDB one and a CSDM one. On each one of those dashboards, they've got some tabs with some metrics. And so those metrics will give you a score between 0 and 100 on how it's assessing it. It gives you a priority in the middle there. So you can see you may have a couple of metrics that are both 0%, and one may be priority critical and one may be priority low. And that's because they're weighted differently. Some metrics are more important than others, and the priority tells you that. And then really importantly, you've got this playbook. And so Emir and a lot of his counterparts did a huge lift to make playbooks. So these are KB articles, one for each metric. It really goes in depth on what the metric's telling you, why it's important, and how to fix it. So if you don't already have these dashboards, they are fantastic. I would recommend going to get them. And there's a YouTube video link. This deck will also be posted, so you can check out just a quick overview on the dashboards. All right, and with that, I'm going to pass the ball over to Mr. Mark Bodman.
Thank you, Callan. So what do fresh CIs really mean here when we talk about this kind of metric within the CMDB? Well, it means that we have a fresh, updated information from the data source that has been reviewed lately, that we can trust the attributes. Those have been upgraded because they do change periodically. That they are properly related. So if there are context changes, we are keeping the CMDB updated with that. And we can kind of measure that based on various metrics like completeness, compliance, and correctness. So those metrics are in place to put a measure around what fresh really means to you. It's important because your organization only trusts this data if it's accurate. So fresh means it's going to be accurate and consumable. Think about it from a refrigerator or food perspective. And it improves processes and products that we sell that rely on this data. There's also a lot of needs for ad hoc reporting and analysis when things come up from time to time outside the products. And last but not least is really the audit requirements can be more easily met if you are in a regulated industry. But most important here, your organization trusts the data. And if they don't, it's usually because this data is stale, old, it hasn't been looked at, or it just is inaccurate and nobody's fixing it. So this is kind of a very important aspect of the CMDB itself.
And Mark?
Yes, thank you. The success of a CMDB really relies on what I call these three pillars. And the first pillar deals with ingestion of information. A lot of information in the data center and in cloud can be discovered, and you should have that on a periodic cycle as often and as frequent as you can is the ideal state. The non-discoverable information also needs to be connected and used. Things like business capabilities, if you're familiar with that, those are not discoverable. So they need to be sourced by somebody or imported from a EA source, as an example. Governance is the middle column here, or pillar, and it's the Achilles heel for successful CMDB. Without governance, there's no insurance that the team is helping to fix these issues. And the last pillar is the insight. It's the value you get on a day-to-day basis by using the data for planning purposes or for operational purposes. So there's a couple builds here. In this particular session, we're going to focus on the lifecycle process, managing and communicating the structured definitions, looking at some things like the class manager, and really how freshness, continually bringing that data in, and how you can tighten that up, especially around virtual machines, which usually come and go very frequently. So there's ways of actually getting that more up to date and more frequently updating things when those virtual machines are changed. So the first thing we're going to talk a little about is something called the class hierarchy. And if you're familiar with the classification of life on the planet, okay, that's a good analogy in my mind to how we organize the type of CIs we have in the system. We have over 1,000 types, and what we do is we put them into their own classification structure, very similar to how we classify life on the planet. And this helps because we're able to put like things underneath the same classification areas, just like plants are in their own classification here. which are different than bacteria or animals. So we need to put the like CIs because they inherit attributes. They make it easier to understand what kind of thing are we really looking at here. And it's not black and white. We're always evolving. We're always adding new classes. There's a downloadable class plugin, CI class plugin, which you can see our later classes as we continuously add to them on a quarter by quarter basis. So it does keep evolving, and we keep adding new things based on the scope of the CMDB, handling things like operational technologies or specific types of things. Like in healthcare, we might be handling things like tomography systems and X-ray machines and things like that. So, but it does keep evolving.
Hi, today I'm going to show you a simple process using the demo CMDB that's available in developer instance. You will be able to follow these steps on your own later on. I received a request to retire some Linux servers as we're no longer using our company. That's our use case for the day. In order to best solve for this, I need to understand where the data is and the CMDB hierarchy. As a developer, one might just go to the sysdb object and look for it there. But many configuration managers do not have that access level. So we won't do that right now, but we'll show you that later in the video. What we'll do is we'll navigate to the main CMDB table, base items all, and we'll review our CMDB here. Here we notice we have 2,784 CIs. Your CMDB will probably be significantly larger than this. I'm going to apply a filter. I'm going to pin it. I'm going to say class is server. I'm going to run, and I'm going to see all my servers. In this case, I have 19 records. You also can go to the base items, all on servers, and then view your servers this way. When I go this way, I actually see 40 servers. And in my third tab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter for Linux servers and look there. And here I can see 4 servers. Now I've done 3 different queries and I got the different numbers, potentially confusing the configuration manager as to what they're really looking at. So let's review why this looks different. Going back to the base item where we say class is server, we are going to add an additional field called class. And then what we're going to do is we're going to group by this class. And notice I can only see servers here. Now let's try this again. Let me change this filter to class is a server and click run. And I'm going to ungroup here. And now you can see 40 different CIs. And if I grouped it by the class, you can actually see that I have AIX servers, Linux servers, Unix servers, and Windows servers. If I go back to my second tab where I have my servers loaded, here I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to add the class attribute. And I'm going to group by the class here as well. And I can also see 2 AX servers, 4 Linux servers, 19 servers, 7 Unix servers, and 8 Windows servers. Going back to our first tab, notice when I change the filter to is a really weird path is shown to me. It says sysclass path is a and a string that is not easy readable. We'll go over the string in a little bit. Compared to no filters here, just says all. Well, why is that? Before we can answer that, let's actually look at our CI class manager. Simply typing in CI class manager, you end up on this page and you can click open hierarchy. Here, if I'm looking for a server, I don't see it here on the list. That is because these are the top level hierarchies. But I can actually start typing and I can see server. Notice that we use a singular notation here. And it gives me the path. It gives me my configuration items, my hardware, my computers, and my servers. and my Linux servers. So let's look at the server. Once you click on it, it will actually take you to the class. You can see some attributes around the class, such as the basic information, see if it's a principal class, attributes. So this class has 111 attributes, of which 106 are derived, means I inherit them from my parent, and 5 are added, meaning that I get them at my level and my children inherit it. So if you go up one level above, you can see at the computer class, there's 106, 85 are derived, and all of these were added at this level. But really, for our use case, we want to look at the Linux server. So when we go into the Linux server table, we can actually see that kernel release 1 attribute was added, 111 were inherited from the parent, and all are here. This is really important when you are creating identification rules, doing some scripting or reporting to know where this data resides. Each class has its own identification rules. In some cases, the rules are dependent, in some cases they're independent, and in some cases, the rules are actually set at a parent level. You have your reconciliation rules and your suggested relationship, which showed you where this class is and how it relates to other classes. If you have the out-of-the-box CMDB help dashboard, you can see your inclusion rules for completeness, compliance, and correctness stayed here, and any inclusion rules that you have. And finally, you can see a list of all the CIs. In this case, we did show we have 4 Linux CIs in this class. But let's look at the hierarchy again here. Right? This is really, really important. Each class can belong to a parent, which belongs to another parent, all the way up to the configuration item class. Now let's look at what our developers see. I'll duplicate this tab. I'll type in tables, and under system definitions tables, I am going to look for, let's look for Linux. We can look at the Linux server table, and now here you can see that it extends the server table. The server table itself extends the computer table, and so on. Let's go back and add 2 columns here. We're going to add 2 columns called sys class code and sys class path, which apply to the CMDB. Now, notice the sys class code and sys class path. That looks very familiar. It is definitely something we have seen before in our filters, right here. So let's copy the sys class path. Now let's remove the things on top. And sorted by sys class path, now we can see all the classes that are in this class path, starting with computer, different type of servers, etc. Now notice each class has a code. For example, server is bang bang, which is at the end of this, and then its parents. So this is one way to determine where the hierarchy comes from. It's always slash followed by 2 character sys class code, and etc. One could technically use this to script out the hierarchy on their own. And here notice that server extends computer, then Windows Server extends server, load balancer extends server, and then Cisco GSS extends load balancer. And all of these are its brothers and sisters because on the same level, and so on. Now that we understand the CMDB class hierarchy, we can move on to our assignment.
Great. That's a really good overview. Whoop.
Hi, today I'm going to
see if it'll let me advance here. Here we go. And Emir, you wanted to talk to this slide.
Sure. I know I went over it very, very quickly in the video, but the idea of figuring out the hierarchy in classes of the classes is really important when you create some retention rules or things like that, because you can only set one per class. So if you went up to a server class and set up a rule, it will be same for your Linux and Windows servers. Whereas you may want to do that different for those two type of servers to understand. And it's important to understand these and how they go from parent to child and how the attributes go down. So when you write reports or some scripts, you may not see a field at a specific level, but if you go deeper down into the hierarchy, you can see it. So I tried to do a visual representation of what this looks like with the sys class code and how these are being built. And then when you see those things on your list views or forms or scripts, you understand what those are. And additionally, there's a reference to the instance of Glide API and Glide table hierarchy that can give you this as well. So for those who like to code, you can get those. But in this example, if Linux did have a child class, it will have the path of Linux in front of it and then its own sys class code. And that's how that is determined.
Sweet. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, thank you. All right, and I'm going to pass it back to Mark.
Hi, yeah, so let's cover the life cycles a little bit and how things work in terms of managing the end of life for that infrastructure that you are managing. And so if you will, you have a typically situation is you're continuously ingesting information from the various data sources. And that process occurs, on an ongoing basis. You want to, like I said earlier, just do this as frequently as possible as your infrastructure management team would allow. Do the build here, please. On top of that, what we do is you can set a policy in Data Manager to say, what happens when we don't have a CI being updated for over 30 days? Was it unplugged? Was it decommissioned? Nobody told anybody? And you can mark it retired and go through a process to verify whether it truly is retired or not. Now, a typical process to deal with these life cycles is that you'd want to then archive and then delete those CIs to declutter your system. Of course, you want to predicate this with any kind of policies for historic reporting purposes to hold on to those, but you do want to process out the information that's no longer relevant over time. Now, the trigger for this can be the legacy lifecycles, what we call the install status and operational status, which Discovery and Service Graph connectors will update. Or if you enable the mapping, you can use the new CSDM lifecycles as well. We don't have time to get into all the nuances of this, but one more build, please. You would basically enable the lifecycle synchronization, which is part of the CSDM navigator, if you want to use the new life cycles to trigger these end of life policies or attestation policies. It works with any process to refresh and revalidate those particular CIs. So discovery process is the most automated, efficient way to do it, but you can also have folks attest personally that those CIs are still exist if there is no easy discovery source. And then I highly recommend you establish policies as you ingest new CI types. If you don't cover it by policy, guess what? It'll never go away. So you should establish and review these policies as you add new data sources or expand your discovery scope.
All right, we've got another video from Emir. This is a shorter one, but we will roll it out on Lifecycle.
Let's look at our Data Foundations dashboard and review this HSD. Click the Data Management Practices tab and locate the Active CIs Update in the last 90 days HSD. Notice the playbook. The playbook is a knowledge article that you can follow on your own on how to remediate this playbook. Notice my score here is 0% because I have too many stale CIs, as well as it's a high priority for me to remediate. Scroll down, you can actually see the count of the CIs that are contributing to this bad metric. 793 of them. You can see a trend here over time, and then my job didn't run for a few days, and then over time, and then an increase in the number of CIs. Same thing down here. Click Show Records button to actually see the records, and notice our filter here. Let's actually expand it. And we're looking for installed and operational CIs in the hardware or virtual machine instance class that have not been updated in the last 90 days. Let's copy the URL. Here we can now start easier filtering through these records. Group by class. And notice all the different classes that are contributing to this that are part of hardware or VM instance. And notice our 4 Linux servers are there. Since we understand this hierarchy, now we know how to best retire these servers. What we're going to do is create a new data policy to retire them. By doing this, we'll accomplish 2 things. We will have accurate data in the CMDB, as well as a reduction in the count and therefore improvement in a score. To do that, we're going to go to the first step. We're going to go to the CMDB workspace and the management tab, and we're going to open up the data manager. Click on the settings, and here you can review all of the retirement definitions. I know that we don't have one for the Linux server, so we're going to go in and add that definition right now. First, select the table. And then here we're going to tell them what to update these fields to. So on the operational status, we want to set the operational status to non-operational, and the install status to retired. I'm going to save this definition. Now we have this new definition, and we can review it. First, we're going to activate it, and now we can use it. Going to the Policies tab, you'll see here that I don't have any published or draft policies, so I'll create a new policy. Give it a meaningful name. Give it a good description. And our policy type will be retire, and you can add any work notes. Click to continue, and now notice our guide here is moving us to the next section. We are actually going to look at the Linux table, because that's where our retirement definition is for. I'm going to look for anything that's where the operational status is operational and install status is installed and most recent discovery is empty. I'll click apply filter. You notice error message, this is my test environment, and you can see the 4 CIs that are going to be impacted by this. Here I could exclude the CI if I needed to, or I can see the excluded records. But here I just want to continue. And we're going to select a user group field. This is if a task has to be created, who will get it. In this case, we're going to use the manage by field on the CI. And then we're going to use the retired configuration item subflow. We will not need a review. We just want them to be retired. Click continue. And this is letting us know that the retire policy schedule will evaluate once a day. That job runs at 3 in the morning. We're going to run it manually shortly here. Click continue. And then finally, we're going to publish this policy. Once the policy is published successfully, you can review it and you can wait for it to run. In a separate tab, I have opened a schedule script execution for the CMDB Data Manager Retire Policy Processor, and I'll click execute now. Let's go back to our Linux server table. And our operation status is retired, install status is retired.
All right, Callan. So I hope I'm getting some questions about install status, but I'm also hoping somebody caught an error that I made here in the video. But I decided to keep it in there. I wanted the operational status to say non-operational. But the system didn't let me do that, because when you switch the install status to retired, which was my second update, it knows that the operational status should also be retired. So even though I tried to do A, the system told me this doesn't sync up to the rules that you have in the system, and therefore it made the operational status retired as well. And I'm getting questions about some hardware CI. So there's a legacy status, legacy called hardware status that we had for customers who had the CMDB for a very, very long time. The operational status, install status were supposed to replace that, but many customers decided to keep it. And there's actually business rules and things in the system that you have to do to make those sync and work between each other, as well as the asset tables. And then we have the new CSDM fields. Now, back to you, Callan.
Great. All right. Thank you. Hopefully this is not gonna restart playing. There we go. All right, we're covering managing VMs now, obviously a huge part of most people's infrastructure at this point, and this is back to Mark.
Yes, so everything you just saw from Emir is really to capture the events that trigger from a vCenter. You can enable these and basically get an update directly from your vCenter for all your virtual machines. This is a little known feature. We find that's a common cause of stale data because VMs are created and destroyed in a scale out dynamic environment automatically. And so a lot of that becomes noise that isn't required to be captured for long periods of time. So these ephemeral CIs can better be tamed, basically get under management by tapping into the vCenter events. So if you can look at the dialog, the navigator on the left-hand side, this is where to look for that. And it does add a feature to your mid server. So you'll have to have a mid server established and potentially discovery licenses to use this. Because the events aren't really a discovery process, however they got there, you could still tap into that, but you do need mid-server. So if you have an SCCM, for example, you might be able to still use this particular feature, but the virtual machines must have gotten there somehow, and you can trigger it like a rediscovery. If there's an event, you can say, okay, new VMs were added, let's rediscover what was added in all the other contexts as one of the triggers that you can add as well.
All right, one last video. This video, I believe, I think it's fine. The sound may be a little bit low compared to the last. So if you're having a hard time with it, just boost your sound a little bit.
Now that we have retired those Linux CIs, let's look at our dashboard. There still is no change here because these jobs run nightly. Even if I look at the number, it still remains the same. However, clicking on it, it will actually show you the reduction by 4 that happened today. Let's look at the records again, and remember my little thing. Let's copy this URL, and here we're gonna group by class again. Now notice the Linux servers are gone because they're no longer stale. They're actually now retired. Now when we look at these virtual machine instances, and I have actually 2 different kinds. Frequently these come from vCenter, and the issue with that is that the lifecycle happens outside of the platform, and we use discovery to periodically scan for changes in that system. So if you do use discovery for that, it is really recommended that you install the vCenter event collector, and the vCenter event collector has different events that happen that you need to replicate or know of in ServiceNow when they occur on the vCenter. And when these events, such as powered on event happens, you probably don't want to consume that. But some events that you want to consume is like the VM cloned event. If a clone happens, then ServiceNow will kick off the probe to go back and find out the information about the clone, what was cloned, where it was cloned, and record it in your CMDB. If something is destroyed or migrated or shut down, those you also want to consume so you replicate the status in the CMDB correctly. Again, review this list here. It's on our doc site. The link will be provided. You probably don't want every single event because you don't want to flood the CMDB, but you do want to subscribe to the ones that are important to you. For other flavors other than vCenter, please look for the right extension or service graph connector. It's going to help you keep your database fresh.
Great. All right. That's a great last video. And last topic of our session today is governance. We may have some time to get through. We've got a lot of questions. I know the guys have been knocking them out, but we've got a lot. We can maybe pick a few to get to live. But before that, back to Mark for governance.
Yes. So thank you. So the governance tips that I have here, there's quite a few. The first is really establish a governance team and roles in order to have the stakeholders that provide data that are responsible and they are the owners of that data in systems that you discover from or ingest from using Service Graph connectors, and also the folks that use the data. We recommend meeting regularly. And what does that mean? Regularly, some customers meet every week, some every month, some multiple times a week. Then that's really required to communicate between these stakeholders what's going on. New processes that have new requirements for data that you don't have. And you also need to review and improve the health based on the overarching metrics that you see. We want to see you trend positively in the health scores that we provide, that you establish. And the only way to fix it is to get people involved. You need to define those metrics. So as you define what new metrics you have, if you have a blind spot, establish new metrics. There's always an improvement here. This is not a one and done situation. It's a continuous process, which leads to the establishing the lifecycle process. As you bring in things, I see a lot of folks get scared when you see deletion of CIs. But honestly, if you don't delete them, a lot of stuff becomes noise over time. And you want to have an aggressive approach to getting rid of stuff. Otherwise, it becomes more like a hoarder nightmare, and you're wading through more, old stuff than you have relevant stuff. So you want to look at retirement, archiving, and deletion in a incremental stepwise approach. So maybe 30 days after you can't find something, go into a retirement phase. 30 days after that, archive, and 30 days after that, potentially delete the CIs if they're no longer possible. But that has to be adjusted based on your policies. Regulated industries, for example, may have a requirement to keep that data around for 7 or 5 years. That really is up to your policies. And I would definitely review this with the folks that are managing your policies to make sure you get that right. You want to manage and communicate the structures, the CI classes, which class to use. Oftentimes these meetings, the governance meetings, is just answering, where do I extend this class? Or, oh, we already have a class where you put that data. Let's put it in the right place and get it out of the wrong place. We want to support the customization extensions. This is an extensible model. We don't have every device imaginable. So you may periodically need to extend the CMDB. You want to do that in a smart way so everybody knows where things are going or should go when you extend it.
And Mark, you just, second to last point, manage and communicate structure and definitions. You hit on something which I think is just important to emphasize as well, which is there are, when we talked about it, Emir showed it, there are a lot of classes and there's a hierarchy to the classes, and it can be not super clear at times which one you should be using. And so in particular, if you think you need to extend a table or create a custom table, chances are, unless it's a very, very specific table to the vertical industry that you're in, that it's available out of the box. So community forum is a good place, I would suggest, to, ping that question out to your peers. Other ServiceNow experts will see that. Mark, I don't know if you have other advice on.
Absolutely. Ping a peer, but also there's a great set of documentation with regards to discovery patterns. I often go there as my reference when I get a question, I don't know it, or looking at a Service Graph connector that we've already worked out an external source and how it lands in our CMDB to identify something similar. I just had a customer interaction that wants to ingest Scale.io. Scale.io is not a discovery pattern that we have, but we do have Nutanix, which is similar. So if you find something in the ballpark, it gives you a reference that you can extend the CMDB in a similar way and not be completely outside, out of whack with our current, taxonomy.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. But and then one of the customers I've been working with for about 4 years is Boeing, who many of you probably know. They have a rather large IT organization, and they've established a CSDM governance framework around CMDB. CSDM is a big part of that because it provides context with the CIs. It provides the technical service context, which are defined by humans, architecture context, which is what you see here. And what I found in this particular customer is when the enterprise architects got involved with their operations leadership, that's where they really got the traction going, because they had an architectural mindset looking at non-discoverable CIs and all of the structure there, and how that links to discoverable CIs, and setting up some of those lifecycle policies, answering questions so they didn't have 10 years of stale data that they were just lugging around for years. And they do meet very regularly to deal with these expanding use cases and expanding needs from the broader team, or different changes, changes in the data sources as they bring in other data sources that they now recognize need to be part of the CMDB. So this is a link to their session at Knowledge from last year. They presented in 23, and they're going to possibly be presenting this year. So I would love to see you guys at Knowledge and learning more about what great looks like at many of our customers.
But thank you for making this interactive session and asking these questions. Just quickly, so I know it sounded like Mark mentioned deleted. Our general guideline is you don't delete CIs, right? You archive them instead, and you follow your data retention policies. You can leave that field blank or 0. They will not be deleted once archived. And your task processes actually do have, for incident change, if a CI is archived, it will actually tell you the CI has been archived, and you can look it in the archive and you can actually restore it if you need it. And the second thing that I was asking about, before you do these things, don't do them in production. Talk to your admins and say, hey, is there a recent clone? Let me go in a lower environment. Let me try to make some of these changes and see what happens to the CMDB. Specifically, if you have a large number of CIs, it's going to happen. Check for performance, check for other things that are happening. You may have some staleness because of some other problems like discovery credentials, or some integrations that are no longer actively working. Talk to those owners first before you decide to do anything with the CIs. All right, Callan, back to you if you have anything else.
Okay, so first of all, before we get to more questions, and I'll just go through and pick some out, unless Mark or Emir, again, if you've got ones in the list that you want us to answer, just check them, answer live in the Q&A there, and then you can get to them. But yeah, so we've got this is a standard slide we're going to include in these now. This is just high-level places to go to find answers to a lot of your questions. There's some in here, like there's one on information on how to configure health dashboard. There is good information on that in product documentation. So that bottom row, second from the left one, although health dashboard and the data foundation dashboards are covered in more detail in previous sessions, which are on the community forum.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that. A lot of sources for additional information, training, now create. There's so many sources that you can tap into to leverage in your day-to-day. There's labs in Now Learning that teach you how to how to use products, or it has better data that you might see in the plugins. The store is also where we're putting a lot of our updates from a product management point of view. We're moving more towards a quarterly cadence for updates versus a family cadence. So the CMDB workspace can be updated with new features, the CI classes, the data foundations dashboards. So all this stuff is available now in the store, and that can be accessed directly by the store or through your plugins or new application management within your instance. So just get in there. We are working on some new features for getting updates on Service Graph connectors in the CMDB workspace directly versus having to go to the store, because there's so many of them, and a lot of administrators aren't aware of updates and new APIs that are being and features that are added to the connectors. So as you increase the number of data sources and connectors you have, that becomes quite a lot to manage. So we do have some new products coming down the pike here shortly to address that.
And again, just before we get into a few minutes of Q&A, here are some, that last slide is a little more general, great set of links. This one, and again, this deck will be posted so that you'll be able to click on these things, but you go into Now Learning, take the CMDB and CSDM fundamentals training, fantastic course content that's there, very highly, like we get great reviews on that. People who go through it generally love those courses. So if you haven't done them, highly recommended. vCenter event collector, there's I think that's the page that Emir brought up in the video there. If you haven't yet, the Data Foundation dashboards, a couple of the videos covered those. Again, that's the best insight into specifics on your health metrics. And then there's data integrity and just some links in community. All right, I'm gonna get to some Q&A here now. Let me just move this. I'm gonna move back up. Oh, okay, we'll just keep it here. All right, we're almost gonna hit 100 questions. So let's see if we can knock some of these down. Shoot, I had a couple sort of easy ones.
Oh, Callan, there's one about discovering credentials. Basically, if your credentials are getting stale, there's ways to automate this credentials checkout from a corporate vault or password managing system, where you get the latest password for your servers from via automation. Pretty much, we support majority of the things that are common in the industry, and you just have to look for what you have and type in discovery and see if it's available, and if not, contact support, and they might guide you to the right direction. But your still credentials should not be an issue with automation.
I had a question on vCenter and ITOM licensing. We knew this one was going to come up, so we just confirmed with the ITOM outbound PM. So vCenter monitoring, it is basically as you're ingesting servers or VMs or anything in, it does require ITOM licensing, and that the charge is based basically on the amount that you ingest. So you talk to your account rep if you aren't already using ITOM on just what that would look like for your organization.
Yeah, just and one more just note on that one. The only connector that we have that doesn't require licenses is SCCM from a legacy point of view. So that's the only exception at this point. So you may have mid servers and connectors, service graph connectors for SCCM without having the ITOM licenses.
Okay, we've got a couple questions, and Mark or Emir, I don't know if you guys know this offhand or if we have to go in. We've got a couple questions on the missing lost status for servers. Lost has raised many questions. How to a virtual environment can just be lost, or what is the expected policies that can be used when servers go into missing lost status? I don't know if this is putting you guys on the spot. Yeah.
Well, so generally, legacy life cycles really don't have a lot of granularity when it comes to that kind of thing. We're adopting a broader set of life cycles. We can't cover that in today's session, but we recognize there's a lot of questions around the new life cycles and how that's going to work effectively going forward. So look for that over the next couple of 6 months or so. We're going to double down on documenting and providing guidance on that. We see more and more products across our platform adopting the new life cycles, and so that's going to be a big factor in us covering that in more detail. The missing lost should never occur for a non-physical thing. So if it's virtual, you can't lose a virtual thing. That should never occur. And if it is occurring, there might be some issues with the way it's governed and how it's being managed. So we'll get into that, like I said, in a future video. But there is a lot of moving parts, and we are changing how that works across all the products on the platform.
All right, we've got a question. The dashboards are free, but to have history over 180 days, you need analytics, basically. Yeah, that is the case. So we got from the analytics team, the graphs basically are the only piece that if you want to get a history trend over 180 days, you do need to have that PA, performance analytics piece. Otherwise, everything else works the same, whether you have that or not. Will the slides be downloadable? Yeah, the slides and this recording will go on that private community forum. All right, just some easy ones to knock off here. Is there a class for API records? There is I don't know if there's a class today. Again, this is forward-looking. There is a lot of work coming in around managing APIs, and so you can look for that coming out. Emir or Mark, I don't know if you have a question for something that exists today around API classes.
I'm not up to date with
Okay.
those,
Yeah.
but I'm
Let me
pretty sure
address
we
that.
have
It is
something in the store. Yeah.
So APIs as a class was just recently added, but there's a lot more plans around adding ingestion sources from gateways and other things like MuleSoft to embellish that model. So we have an accurate representation operationally how APIs are used or consumed, right, generally across the enterprise. So this is an area of focus for the next year or so. We will have a something called API Insights that will be released basically by the end of the year or so. So that's kind of the goal.
Yeah. Hey, Callan, I have a quick one. It says if you're talking hardware, wouldn't you need to leverage a disposal workflow to retire hardware assets and not leverage a staleness trigger? Absolutely. Your hardware should go through the lifecycle. If it's a server, change management to decommission it, and then proper disposal, certificate of destruction. Your asset manager marks it as retired, right, or disposed. For EUC, your laptops, you go to a depot, drop it off, and they mark it. The example I showed was legacy data from the old system that was brought in. It was just sitting around for years. It's time to get rid of it.
Did ask on finding things in the store for CMDB. I mean, CMDB is a good keyword that finds most of the stuff that I think you're going to need to know. I think that keyword works. There are also some filters on the store on the left-hand side you can use to look for things like service graph connectors specifically. So there's a couple of places to use filtering or just use a keyword to search for things. But one thing you can do is on those categories, on the search filters and stuff in the store, you can subscribe for updates. So if you subscribe to updates to Service Graph connectors, for example, as new ones are published or changed, updated, you will get notified from the store directly. So that's a good feature that a lot of folks just don't take advantage of.
Okay. Does something have to be implemented for the lifecycle stage and lifecycle status to start being set from the install status or operational status? Is there an automated tool or anything you set up for that, Mark?
So there's a CSDM mapping feature that is under the CSDM Navigator that's out of the box and has been shipping for years. That will map your legacy to new statuses. Now, to be really transparent here, there will be changes here because as more products start using those statuses and start contributing automation to those statuses, and even trickling those statuses to dependent elements. So for example, if you decide to retire an application, should you automatically retire all the virtual machines used in that application, right? Mark them as retired. So there's automation coming down the road as we harmonize in the use of our lifecycle stages and statuses, but that's behind getting everybody to use them. That's still a little ways out.
So, Callan, I posted a link. You have to activate it as part of the thing that Mark just said, CSDM, and you have to create your own mappings if you have custom codes.
One of the challenges we have is customers that have been on the platform for a long time have customized their operational or install status or even added something completely different. And so that all has to be somehow analyzed and mapped to the new ones. The suggestion is to try to adopt those as a kind of a read-only exercise for a period of time to validate that your mappings and any customizations have been accounted for, and then eventually long-term switch to using them explicitly. But that is, again, even the product sets, we're not quite there yet.
Somebody else just asked about the recording and the slides. Emir posted it at 35 minutes after the top of the hour, so about half an hour ago. If you just scroll up in the chat, if you missed that the first time. And we're going to take two more here. And so before I just sort of pick a couple out, any ones in particular, Emir or Mark, you want to answer?
I just want to just remind again, this Data Foundations dashboard is on the store, and you have to install it yourself, and then it runs a nightly job. I know there were a few comments saying, "Hey, I don't see it in my instance." I don't know if it's in the product yet, Callan. I'm not sure if we included it or not, but for sure it is on the store if you don't have it.
The Data Foundation dashboards, yeah, it is not in the product yet. It is on the store. Yep.
Yeah, and for Data Manager, make sure you have the latest version, right? That you have to go to your plugins and make sure you update it to the latest. Yeah. It is possible that you might have skipped the upgrade. It's actually what happened to me while I was recording the first video. I didn't have the latest version, so it didn't work properly.
Sure. But yeah, and some of the functionality is tied to being up on the, when we talk about the family release, that's like the city names that just increment by letter, where that's what we call the family releases. Some of the store dashboards will be, you need to be on, for example, Utah or Vancouver, whatever the latest family release is. So the functionality will work for things that are out, but to get some of the absolute latest and greatest, your instance has to be on the latest family release. An easy one, somebody said, are there demos for CMDB and ITOM? Best place for sort of those high level demos is servicenow.com. Just go to the .com website and go through from there. They've got all kinds of great info on that. All right, I think with that, we're going to wrap. We're fine.
Yeah, just one more quick question. There was a question about Service Graph connectors. We have about 55 of them in the store right now, and we are doubling down on the number and getting folks to adopt those. We're trying to get more folks to just use them because they are just plug and play, literally. And so we'll probably do an outreach session on that in the future to cover that in more detail. So just watch for that.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, apologies, folks. We did get to 110 questions. We did not get to a lot on this. We probably one of the highest number of questions we've ever had in a session. So apologies we didn't get to them. We will try if there's ones that are really critical that we see through here. You may get an email out with a response. My best recommendation though is the community forums are great. Continue to use those. And thank you very much. Yeah, you'll see we definitely will have a number of these sessions this year, and you should see one from the product team coming out, I believe, in March, but it'll be official once you get the invite in your inbox, but you can watch for that. All right. Thank you again, everybody. And thanks for your attention and attending today. Goodbye.